few years ago, I was playing a session at 500 zone games on Bodog, and after a few minutes, I realized something was off. I had never felt that way before, so it was a very unique feeling. As I was playing, I started to feel like I was getting disproportionately attacked when I held a weak hand. If I opened pre-flop with a weak hand, I would frequently get 3-bet, but the same wouldn't happen when I had a strong hand. When I was 3-betting or 4-betting with weak hands, I would get re-raised and be forced to fold. That started to really tilt me. It felt like I was getting cheated somehow. I was like, what the fuck, can people see my cards? What are these super users? What the hell is going on here? Well, eventually, a few days later, I was able to understand what was going on. I was getting exploited. Once I understood how I was getting exploited, I was able to implement the exploit into my own game, and in the next few weeks, I produced this graph. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything about the single greatest exploit available in online poker, which is worth thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and yet no one is talking about it. Let's go. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. My name is Saulo Costa, and here I make poker strategy simple so that you can make more money. The exploits I'm talking about are timing tail exploits. Timing tail exploits are, in my opinion, the greatest exploits in online poker. And I believe until the end of this video, you're going to agree with me in this claim. Now, of course, there are many possible sources of information you can use to exploit your opponents other than timing information. For example, you can exploit your opponent's bet sizing patterns, you can exploit your opponent's HUD stats, and you can exploit your opponents by taking a look at hands that they went to showdown with. But differently than timing tail exploits, these other sources of information are not available all the time. For instance, if you want to exploit your opponent's bet size patterns on the river, you're gonna have to wait for a river situation to come up against that particular opponent to see what they're doing and to take notes on what they're doing and eventually come up with some sort of pattern that they use. So this is going to take a long time for you to have enough information. When we're talking about HUD stats, it's the same thing. In order for you to exploit a certain HUD stat on your opponent, you're gonna have to gather a lot of hand histories against that opponent. You're gonna have to play a lot of hands against that particular opponent for you to even have a HUD stat to look at and then drive some information from those stats. So it takes a lot of hands. And the same thing can be said about hands that go to showdown. I think the hands that go to showdown are extremely valuable piece of information on your opponent, but it's very few hands that go to showdown. It's very few hands that go post-flop, and out of the hands that go post-flop, very few of those hands actually go to showdown, so you don't have access to that information all the time. When we're talking about timing tails, on the other hand, every single action that your opponent takes, they're giving you information. They're going to take some time to act. They're going to maybe take 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and regardless of how much time they take to make that action, they're giving you information in every single spot of the game tree. So this is extremely valuable in my opinion, and if you can pay attention, you can gather a lot of information on your opponents. Now, regardless of what is the reason for why timing tails are not being discussed more often in the poker community, in this video, I'm gonna give you 3 pieces of evidence of why I think this is really a thing and why I think you should start using it in your game. Okay, let's start with the first piece of evidence that I have, which are Time Mojo articles. So Time Mojo is or was a software company that focused on timing tail tracking. So basically, back in the day, poker sites would allow these types of softwares where Time Mojo, for example, would track the hand histories as you were playing, and not only they would track the actions in the hands, but they would also track the timings associated with each action. So imagine you would play a 3-bet pot and your opponent would make a C-bet. So Time Mojo would not only record the fact that your opponent C-bet against you, but it also record the timing that your opponent took to place that C-bet. So the software was available for a few years, but later PokerStars and other sites prohibited those types of softwares, so they're no longer available for people to use. But back in the day, Time Mojo was available, and they would be posting some information in their own website and also in their Instagram account, where they would try to attract more customers by showing their data. So let's take a look at some of the data that Time Mojo would post back in those times. So here I am in Time Mojo's Instagram account. You can see that they still have 366 followers, even though the software has not been usable for many years by now. But they have this Instagram page, and right here in the bottom, you can see two posts that they made that I think are very interesting. And this is where I started my explorations with timing tells. I had a feeling that they were a thing. I started looking out in the internet, and then I saw Time Mojo, and then I came across these two posts that they made here. So the first post that they made is a study that they made at 500 Zoom, where they looked at fold to 3-bet frequency based on RFI timing. So they basically gathered a bunch of hands that they had data mined, and they separated hands where people took very quick timing to RFI, and then hands that they took a long time to RFI, and then they checked the fold to 3-bet stat in those two separate samples. You can see here the first interval that they picked was from 0 to 1.54 seconds, and then a second interval of 9 seconds plus with the RFI timing. So this is very interesting, and we see here some very significant discrepancies. So when people take very quick timing, so when they RFI very quickly, they only fold, at least in this data they had at the time for 500 Zoom games, people only folded 47% of the time when their RFI was very quick. Whereas if they took a very long time to RFI, 9 seconds plus, they would fold 55% to 3-bet. So this is really significant. If these numbers are true and they can be trusted, this is a very, very huge difference, and this should be taken into account when constructing your ranges. Imagine you're facing a button open, and instead of expecting a 47% fold equity or 49% fold equity, you can expect a 55% fold equity. In this case, you could significantly expand your 3-bet range and play a looser range, play more aggressively. Now, in contrast, if you would expect a 47% fold frequency, you should adapt your 3-bet range. You should 3-bet tighter, you should 3-bet more linear, a stronger range, because you expect your opponent to continue more often. They also made a second post here where they saw the fold to 4-bet frequencies based on 3-bet timing. So same idea as before, separated two intervals and then checked the fold to 4-bet based on the 3-bet timing. We can see here that for the first interval between 0 to 4 second 3-bet, people would fold only 35% to 4-bet, really sick. Whereas in contrast, if people took 10 seconds or more to 3-bet, they would fold 45% to 4-bet. So here you can see a 10% increase in fold equity just based on the RFI timing. So these pieces of evidence here really got me curious about timing tells, and I started implementing that into my game, which leads us to our second piece of evidence in this video, which is my own personal experience. Back in 2020, I started not only researching about timing tells, as I did and I eventually found Time Mojo, but I also decided to explore, experiment with stuff and test stuff in real time, in real games, and that's exactly what I did. And I'm gonna show you a few of the things that I was doing and also discussing with my students in my private Discord server in my staking company, Metagame. Okay, so let's take a look at that. So you can see here, the first time that I made a post about timing tells to my students was back in 31st of August of 2020, and I did so in my own poker journal. We have a lot of poker journals inside our Discord server for our staking company, and I had one for myself, and I would just share hands and other thoughts with my students. And here in 31st of August, I decided to share what I was doing with regards to timing tells. And you can see here that I basically said that I was experimenting with it, and I started to notice that regs were taking too long to raise pre-flop, and then I started expanding my 3-bet, 4-bet, and 5-bet ranges. And I was doing some pretty crazy stuff. I can show you guys some examples here. These are not actually the craziest ones. The craziest ones will be for later. But here you see someone opening, I 3-bet, the guy 4-bet. I just jam ace-jack suited, the guy folds, just based on timing tell. I have pocket sevens, button opens, I 3-bet, he 4-bets me, I jam, he folds. Pocket sixes, I did the same thing. Button opens, I 3-bet, he 4-bet, I jam, he folds. Ace queen off, so cutoff opens, I 3-bet, cutoff 4-bets, I jam, he folds. So I was doing a lot of this stuff. This time I was experimenting a lot. So you see here ace jack off, I open, the guy 3-bets, I 4-bet, he folds. So basically I was doing it very aggressively, and then I started discussing this with my students, trying to get some feedback and also understand how they felt about it, if they had already thought about it sometime. And then we just started talking, exchanging ideas. I shared with them some of the Time Mojo articles that I had seen. Unfortunately, these doesn't seem to be available anymore, but at the time they were. So we were discussing hands and talking about how we felt about these things. And then it was very interesting to talk a lot about this with my students. And then I would start to share some graphs showing my progress. My red line started to increase and all that stuff. And here you can see some of the wildest things I was doing. So check a look at that, like ace-3 off, big blind versus small blind opens, I 3-bet, he 4-bet, I jam, he folds. And I put some gives here, like I've been a bad boy, oh my God. Pocket twos, like I opened the guy 3-bet, I 4-bet based on timing, he calls. This time he called and then I checked back the flop, bet the turn, he just folded. I'm an addict. Ace jack, I open, no, the guy opens, I 3-bet, he 4-bets, I jam ace jack off, pre-flop, the guy folds, and I shared this graph. As I'm experimenting with this stuff, I made 5 buy-ins of red line in 1,600 hands. That's pretty sick. So yeah, basically that's what I was doing, and I was really getting out of line with it. You can see here, 10-8 offsuit, Jesus Christ. Guy opens, I 3-bet, the guy 4-bets, I jam, 10-8 offsuit, and he folds. And basically I was just getting really wild with it. I had in my mind that I needed to test it. If I was going to really figure out if this thing is true, if this thing makes sense, if there is money to be had here, I need to test it. I can't be afraid of losing money. I need to test stuff, and that's exactly what I did. And you're gonna see right now how profitable that was for me. Take a look at the graph that I was able to produce not much later that I started implementing these timing tell exploits in my game. So a lot of discussions here, a lot of talking with my students, sharing some time mojo, etc. Some hyper aggression, blah, blah, blah. And I believe here is the graph, yeah. So I made a post here a few weeks later where I was wondering, variance or demolishing the field? Take a look at this graph. Like, this is really, really insane. I was playing exclusively 500 NL at the time, and essentially what I did here, I made $35,000 in EV, which is, in my math here, 70 buy-ins, because I was playing 500 now. So I made 70 buy-ins in 40,000 hands. That's like almost 20 big blinds per 100 hands in this sample. And look at the red line. Like, the red line alone, I won 17,000 and a half, give it or take. And that's like 35 buy-ins. Yeah, so I won 35 buy-ins in the red line alone in 39,000 hands. So that's almost 10 big blinds per 100 with the red line, just exploiting timing tells. Actually, I was exploring with some other stuff as well. I was exploring with some overbets and river raise and stuff, but a lot of what was doing was timing tell exploits, and this was what I was able to do. And after that, I never looked back. I continued to this day using timing tells in my game to exploit every single opportunity that I can take advantage of. Now, if you're someone like me, perhaps just someone else's personal experience and some random articles in the internet are not going to be enough to convince you that this is something really valuable and that you should trust. Trust me, I was exactly the same way. Even after having this personal experience of winning a lot of money making these exploits, I still wanted to see real data. I wanted to see proof with my eyes. Like, is this really a thing? Like, can I prove this to my students or to other people that follow me? So I had this crazy idea. What if I could build a poker training environment where my students would grind in this poker training environment, where I would provide them a very similar experience to the grind, and then I would track their timings inside that software. So basically, there would be no other alternative, because making a software that would track timing tells in real time in poker sites would not be possible. That's prohibited. So I thought of building a training environment where I would basically try to replicate the grind experience as much as possible. And then within that program, I could track the timing tell of my students or whoever was playing on my program. And this way I could gather information about timings And yes, you could say this doesn't replicate necessarily what people will do in game, but it's the closest thing that we can get. So I thought that this would be a very good idea. So using the knowledge I have gathered as a software developer before I was a poker player, I spent 4 months straight just coding. I coded and coded and coded, and I built this program, this custom training program for my students, where I could track their timing tells inside a program. So I'm gonna show you what this program looks like, and I'm going to show you the data that I was able to collect with my students grinding in this program. Let's take a look. So the module that I created here for my students to study with, and then that I could gather their timings, is called Grind Simulator. So the name is very self-explanatory. I wanted something that would simulate the grind experience so that my students would play, and then I would gather their timings, and then I would be able to make some analysis later. So let's take a look at how this works. So I can choose here which format, a table size that I want. Let's just do 3 max for simplification, zoom to tables, and I click start. So when I click start, the program opens up 2 tables, and you can see that it really feels very close to grinding. I can start playing here, and you can see that it's very close to a grind experience. Basically here, we're going to be playing against bots, and we're going to be getting immediate feedback on our actions. And while we're clicking the buttons here, the software is tracking every single action and every single timing on those actions. So here with Ace-3 suited, the software tracked how long I took to make this call. So afterwards, I was able to build a separate module where I would analyze all the information from the hundreds of thousands of hands my students played on the program. So I released this program in April 2022 for my students, and since then they have played about 700,000 hands in this program, which was enough for me to make a lot of analysis here. So let's just close next big blind, and then I'm gonna show you guys some of the data that I was able to gather with this. So we can go over this MDA tab here. In this MDA tab, what we can do is we can filter for actions, and then we can also filter for the timing of those actions. And the program is going to automatically calculate some stats here in the bottom. So for example, let's do the same thing that Time Mojo did. Let's take a look at RFI frequencies and then fold to 3-bet based on timing. So let's select preflop, RFI. Let's focus on the button, and then let's use the same interval that Time Mojo used. So RFIs below 1.5 seconds. We want to take a look at what's the baseline RFI with unfiltered timing, and then take a look at how the fold to 3-bet changes when the RFI is very quick. So if I click this analyze button here, that's exactly what the program is going to do. It's going to track all the hands in which my students took less than 1.5 seconds to RFI, and then it's going to calculate the stats here in the bottom. Let's take a look. Okay, so these are the results that my program is showing here. On the top, we have the unfiltered stats. So these are the stats for my students when not considering what the timing they took with their RFI. So you see here that the 4-3 is 65% in 18,482 hands, very significant sample, and the 4-bet frequency is 10.5. We also have the 4-5 here. And here in the bottom, you see the filtered stats for my students here. So these are their 4-3 and 4-bet stats when their RFI timing was under 1.5 seconds. And this is when things start to get very interesting here. You see that the 4-3 goes down by 7%. It goes down from 65% to 58%. And the 4-bet frequency goes up. It goes from 10.5 to 14.13. So this confirms what Time Mojo showed us, and it's basically very straightforward. When people take very quick timing to act, basically they have a slightly stronger range. You see they continue more often and they 4-bet more often. And what about those very long timings? Time Mojo used 9 seconds. Let's use 9 seconds ourselves here and see what the program spits out. All right, so here are the results for when the RFI timing was 9 seconds or higher. Again, the baseline stats, 65% 4-3 and 10.5 4-bet frequency. And when my students took 9 seconds or more to RFI, and we have a pretty substantial sample here, over 2,000 instances of when they took 9 seconds or more to RFI, they folded to 3-bet 70% of the time, so 5% more often than the baseline unfiltered stats, and 12% more often compared to the very quick RFI. And the 4-bet frequency also went down by 2%, from 10.5 to 8.4, and that's about a 6% difference relative to the very quick RFI. So undoubtedly here we're seeing a trend. Quick RFI means slightly stronger range, longer RFI means weaker range. Let's see if the same holds up for 3-betting frequencies and fold to 4-bet frequencies as well. We can select here all 3-bet, which is going to consider all situations where my students place the 3-bet. And then we can use also the same interval as Time Mojo from 0 to 4 seconds 3-bet, and then later over 10 seconds. Let's click Analyze. Actually, I'm going to remove this filter. Let's click Analyze and see. Okay, so these are the fold to 4-bet frequencies when my students 3-bet. We see here that when we don't consider timing, their fold to 4-bet is about 46%, and their 5-bet frequency is about 19%. We have almost 11,000 sample here in the stat. And when they 3-bet with the quick timing under 4 seconds, we see the fold to 4-bet frequency decreasing to 39%. So that's almost 7% difference here in the fold to 4-bet, and the 5-bet increasing from 19 to 24%. So clearly here, when they're 3-betting quicker, they have a stronger range. They're folding less to 4-bet and they're 5-betting more. And then finally, let's see the 3-bets over 10 seconds and click Analyze and see how that changes. Okay, so here are the results for when the 3-bet is longer than 10 seconds. Again, the baseline stats, 46% fold to 4-bet and then 19% 5-bet. And when my students took over 10 seconds to 3-bet, they folded to 4-bet 57% of the time, and they only 5-bet 12.7%. That's a huge difference. We see here like 11% difference in fold equity relative to baseline stats. And if we compare to quick 3-bet, that was 39. So if my math is correct, that's like 17, almost 18% difference in fold equity. And also a substantial difference in the 5-bet frequency, which the baseline is 19. So it decreased by almost 7 points percentage here. And then relative to the quick 3-bets, which I think was 24, that's like almost 12% difference here relative to the 5-bet frequency. So after I saw these numbers, I was able to finally convince myself that this is a huge thing, and it made me even more pumped to get into the tables and exploit my opponents using timing tails. Of course, again, a disclaimer here is that the training environment is not exactly the same as the grinding environment, and the behavior that we see from people when they're training is not the same as when they're actually playing. I give you that, but in my opinion, this is substantial enough evidence for me to believe that you should and I should use this into our games to make more money. If you enjoyed this video and you really think timing tails are a thing you're gonna start using to improve your game and increase your win rate, you might want to check the pinned comment that I'm going to leave right here below this video, where I'm essentially collecting people that might be interested in a timing tail course. So click on the link I'm going to leave in this comment, and there I'm going to be able to collect your email, and when my course comes up, you're gonna be one of the first people to be contacted. All right, this is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, I imagine you're going to like this video I separated for you right here. See you there.